I still don't know if I went into those woods as a hunter or as a fool. Maybe both. All I know is that I went in with a friend, and only one of us came back. We'd planned it for months, a long hunt, far from the roads, deep into the kind of wilderness where you could walk for weeks and never see another man. We had rifles, packs, enough gear to last through the season. We thought we knew the forest. We thought it was just trees and rivers and game. We were wrong. The first days were like any other trip. Early mornings, breath fogging in the cold, the crunch of frost under our boots. We tracked deer, set up campfires, told stories under the stars. Nothing unusual, nothing strange. Until the morning, my friend was gone. He didn't vanish with a scream. There was no struggle, no blood, no tracks leading off into the underbrush. I woke up, and his bedroll was empty. His rifle still leaned against a tree. His pack was half open, like he'd been rifling through it before stepping away. But he never stepped back. I searched for hours, then days. I shouted his name until my voice cracked. I followed faint trails, broken branches, anything that looked like a clue. Nothing. The forest swallowed him whole. Time bled into weeks, then into months. My food ran out, and I was forced to hunt just to stay alive. Rabbits, grouse, the occasional deer. I was no longer a hunter chasing sport. I was a starving man clawing through the woods for survival. And as the weeks dragged on, something else began to gnaw at me. The forest didn't feel like it had when we first arrived. It grew heavier. The air seemed thicker, like it pressed down on me. Silence stretched too long between bird calls. Even the wind in the branches seemed to twist into whispers when I tried to sleep. I kept moving, trying to find a way out, but the woods went on forever. No road, no smoke from distant cabins, no sign of the world I came from. The map in my head stopped making sense. It was like walking in circles through a place that kept changing just behind your back. Then, one afternoon, I found something that froze me in my tracks. It was a shirt, my friend's shirt. It hung from a low branch, like someone had placed it there for me to find. The fabric was too clean, too fresh, like it had been set out only hours before. But across the chest was a wide, dark stain. Blood. Dried into the fibres, but not rotted, not weathered, as though it had been spilled only yesterday. I remember standing there with the shirt clutched in my hands, shaking, whispering his name, hoping he'd step out from the trees. But in my gut, I knew. The shirt wasn't a sign of life, it was bait. Still, I couldn't stop. I pushed deeper into the woods, following a trail that seemed to open just for me. By the time the sun dropped, I came across something even stranger. An old building, or what was left of one. It was no cabin, more like the skeleton of a room, built of timber blackened with age, standing crooked in the dirt. No roof, no door, just four walls leaning against the dark. It shouldn't have been there, not in the middle of nowhere, but it was. I was too tired, too broken to keep moving, so I stayed. I spread my blanket across the floor and huddled against the wall as night closed in. But I couldn't sleep, because every time I started to drift, I heard something outside. Soft, deliberate footsteps circling, and the sound of breathing. I woke the next morning to a silence that felt heavier than the day before. The kind of silence where you don't hear birds, don't hear the rustle of squirrels, don't even hear the wind in the trees. Just a blanket of stillness pressing against your ears. The first thing I noticed was that my camp looked different. My fire pit had burned out completely, leaving only ash. But the strangest part was my gear. My pack, which I'd left zipped and leaning against the old stone wall, was half open, the flap folded back neatly, like someone had gone through it during the night. Nothing was missing, but things were rearranged. My knife wasn't where I left it, my spare ammo box was upside down, and my canteen was lying on the floor, its cap unscrewed. I tried to convince myself it was just me. Maybe I'd done it half asleep. Maybe I'd been so rattled from the previous night that I wasn't thinking straight, but deep down, I knew it wasn't me. The footprints outside the cabin confirmed it. They weren't human, at least not fully. Long, narrow impressions stretched into the soil, ending in claw-like tips. But what made my stomach turn was the spacing. They looked almost like a man's barefoot tracks, only elongated, as if the toes had sharpened into points. They circled the cabin twice and then disappeared into the tree line. I didn't follow them, not then. Something told me that if I left the cabin unprepared, I wouldn't be coming back, so I packed carefully. I loaded the rifle, counted my rounds, and forced down a strip of jerky that tasted like ash in my mouth. Every bite felt like chewing leather soaked in dread. For the rest of that day, I searched. Not for game this time, but for my friend. The forest was a maze of shifting light and tangled paths. Every deer track I thought I'd found twisted into something else. Sometimes it looked human, sometimes animal. Once, I swore I saw his boot print, half sunk into mud. But when I leaned closer, the heel mark stretched out into claws. I staggered back, nearly losing my balance. The deeper I went, the stranger it became. Time didn't feel right. The sun seemed to stall high in the sky, then dip suddenly lower as if I'd missed whole hours. At one point, I came across a stream I didn't recognize. It was narrow, clear, and bubbling quietly, but when I cut water in my hand, the reflection that looked back wasn't mine. It was him, my missing friend. His face was pale, lips cracked, and his eyes, God, his eyes, looked hollow, as if someone had scooped out the life from behind them. His mouth moved, but the sound of rushing water drowned it out. I dropped the water instantly, stumbling back until the image broke. I didn't drink, couldn't. I tightened the cap on my canteen, even though I knew it was already nearly empty. Hours later, near dusk, I found something else. A shirt, torn, dirty, but undeniably his. It was snagged on a bramble bush, hanging there like someone had tried to pull it free and failed. The fabric was damp, not from rain, but from something darker. Stains, rust-coloured, blotchy, blood, though not fresh. I turned it over in my hands, fighting the bile rising in my throat. The tears in the fabric weren't from branches or rocks. They were jagged, uneven, like something with claws had raked through it. But the strangest thing, it smelled clean, like it had just been washed. That was when I knew this wasn't natural. The forest wasn't just holding me here, it was playing with me, showing me pieces of him, but twisted, wrong, never the whole truth. Night came quickly after that. Too quickly. One moment the treetops glowed with the last light of evening. The next, I was stumbling in near darkness. I barely found my way back to the cabin, guided only by instinct and the faint memory of the trail. Inside, I bolted the door with an old iron latch and sat by the dead fireplace, rifle across my lap. I told myself I wouldn't sleep. I told myself I'd stay awake, listen, and be ready. But exhaustion is a cruel enemy. My eyes grew heavy, my head dipped. I don't know how long I slept, but what woke me wasn't sound. It was breath. Warm, damp breath against my ear. I snapped awake, swinging the rifle up, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The cabin was empty. Shadows clung to the corners, but there was no one there. My pack still sat by the wall, my boots at the foot of the cot. Nothing disturbed. And yet, I knew I hadn't dreamed it. The skin on my ear was wet. That night, the sounds returned. Not outside this time, but all around. Scratching on the roof, footsteps pacing in the dirt, and then voices. At first, they were distant, too faint to understand. Then they grew clearer. One of them was mine. "Let me in," it whispered, exactly in my own voice. "It's cold out here. You're not safe." My blood froze. I gripped the rifle so tightly my hands ached. Then came another voice. His. My friend's. "Help me," it begged. "Please. It's me." I stood, trembling, and crept to the window. Outside, the clearing was bathed in silver moonlight. The trees swayed gently, though I felt no wind. And in the shadows, just beyond the tree line, something moved. Tall, thin, its limbs too long, its head wrong. I didn't see its face, not fully, but I saw the way it tilted, jerky and unnatural, like a puppet with tangled strings. I saw the way its shadow bent the wrong direction, stretching toward me instead of away from the moonlight. And then the scream, not from the trees, not from outside, from right behind me. I spun, rifle ready, but the cabin was empty. The scream still rang in my ears, high-pitched, ragged, half animal and half human. I staggered back, pressing against the door, my breath shaking. My mind told me to run, to get out, but my body refused to move. When silence finally returned, I realized something chilling. The scream hadn't echoed, not once. It was as if the walls, the forest, the entire world had swallowed it whole. I don't remember falling asleep after that scream. Maybe I never really did. Maybe I just drifted in and out, half conscious, clinging to the rifle like a lifeline, while the dark pressed in from all sides. When morning finally came, it felt wrong. Too bright, too sudden. One moment I was staring into shadow, the next, sunlight poured through the cracks in the wooden boards. That entire day was a blur of walking in circles. I set out east, following the sun, only to find myself back at the same moss-covered stump 2 hours later. I tried west, same result. No matter the direction, the forest folded in on itself, spitting me back into the same clearing. The worst part was the hunger. I hadn't had a proper meal in days. I set traps, stalked game, but every sound of movement led to nothing. No birds, no rabbits, no deer. The forest that once teemed with life was barren, empty. By evening I was weak and lightheaded. I found myself back at the cabin, again, like it was the only anchor point in a forest that had lost all logic. And that's when I saw it, a shape crouched just inside the tree line. At first, I thought it was a deer. The antlers were there, wide and branching. Its body hunched on 4 legs, half hidden in the shadows. Relief washed through me. I could eat. I could finally eat. I raised the rifle, steadying my breath. But as I squinted down the sight, the details sharpened. The body wasn't right. Too long, too lean. The legs bent wrong, backward like a dog's, but stretched too far. And the head god. The head. It was a man's face stretched across the skull of a deer. The jaw too wide, the eyes too human, blinking slowly like it knew I was watching. The antlers sprouted from a cracked human skull, skin tearing around the base as if they'd grown there unnaturally. I pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing through the clearing. The thing jerked back as the bullet struck, but instead of blood, instead of collapse, it screamed. Not an animal scream, a man's scream. My friend's scream. The sound shattered me. I froze, finger locked on the trigger, unable to breathe. My vision blurred with tears, but when I wiped them away, the clearing was empty. No creature, no body, no blood, just silence. I backed into the cabin, shaking, locking the door behind me. My ears still rang with the sound of that scream. My friend's voice. Exactly his voice. The night that followed was the longest of my life. Every hour, something scratched at the walls. Sometimes claws, sometimes fingernails. Once I heard knocking. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, like someone asking politely to be let in. I didn't move from my spot on the floor, rifle in hand, eyes glued to the door. Then came the voices again. This time, they didn't whisper. They spoke clearly, taunting, circling the cabin. "Why'd you leave me? You're supposed to help me. You shot me." I pressed my palms over my ears, but it didn't matter. The voices weren't outside anymore. They were inside my head. They spoke in my thoughts, overlapping, twisting, until I couldn't tell which were mine and which weren't. At some point, I must have blacked out. When I woke, the fire was lit. I hadn't lit it. The flames crackled warmly in the fireplace, casting the cabin in a soft glow. My gear had been rearranged again. Knife laid neatly across my pack, canteen refilled to the brim, jerky unwrapped and waiting. And in the chair across from me sat my friend. He looked fine, a little pale, a little thin, but alive. And relief hit me so hard I almost dropped the rifle. "You're here," I whispered. I thought you were gone." He smiled faintly. "You found me." But something was wrong. His lips didn't quite match the words. They moved too slowly, a fraction of a second behind the sound. And his eyes didn't blink. I stood, backing toward the wall. "You're not him." The thing tilted its head, smile stretching wider. "But I sound like him." Then it rose from the chair, taller than any man should be, its legs unfolding too long, arms dangling like ropes. My friend's skin stretched tight over something else beneath, something larger, something wrong. I fired without thinking. The bullet punched through its chest. It staggered but didn't fall. Instead, it let out another scream, the same one I'd heard in the clearing, the same one that didn't echo, the same one that wasn't entirely human. The fire went out. The cabin was plunged into darkness. And in that darkness, I heard it moving toward me. The darkness in that cabin was thick, so thick it felt alive. My rifle was warm in my hands, barrel smoking, but I couldn't see more than a foot in front of me. And then came the breathing. Not mine, not close. Deep, ragged, wet gulps of air circling me, first at the door, then the window, then right behind me. I swung the rifle wildly, finger trembling on the trigger. "Show yourself," I shouted, but my voice cracked, weak and useless against the suffocating dark. The answer was a whisper, inches from my ear. "You already know what I look like." I bolted for the door. The wood cracked under my shoulder and I spilled into the night, gasping, stumbling into the clearing. The forest loomed around me, endless and waiting. But something had changed. For the first time in weeks, I could hear life again. Crickets, owls, the rustle of branches. The forest wasn't silent anymore. I didn't trust it. I ran anyway. Branches tore at my arms. Roots snagged my boots, but I didn't stop. I didn't care if I was running in circles. I just needed to put distance between me and that cabin. But the forest wasn't letting me go quietly. Everywhere I turned, I saw flashes of it. The deer skull, the human eyes, the antlers splitting through torn skin. Sometimes ahead of me, sometimes just over my shoulder, watching, waiting. And sometimes it wasn't the creature I saw at all. Sometimes it was my friend, his face pale, clothes still marked with blood. Sometimes he stood in the trees staring at me. Other times, he stumbled behind me, calling out, "Wait, don't leave me here." The worst part, his voice wasn't angry anymore. It was desperate, pleading. I wanted to turn back. God help me, I almost did. But I kept running. I don't know how long I ran before I collapsed. Hours, days, time meant nothing anymore. My body gave out in a patch of tall grass, and I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe I die here, and maybe that's better. But when I opened my eyes, light. Not the false switch-flip daylight of the cabin. Real light. Dawn. And in the distance, past the trees, I saw something I hadn't seen in months. A road. I stumbled toward it, half crawling, half dragging myself. Asphalt. Cracked and overgrown, but real. Civilization. I laughed, cried, fell to my knees on that broken road. A car never came, no voices answered, but it didn't matter. The forest had let me go, or at least that's what I told myself, because the further I walked, the more I realised it hadn't let me go at all. The signs were everywhere, scratches carved into tree trunks along the roadside, "Stay." Piles of rocks arranged in shapes that made no sense. A dead crow nailed to a post, its beak forced open. And the whispers, always the whispers. Sometimes they were behind me, sometimes ahead, but they never stopped. By the time I saw the first farmhouse, my hands were shaking so bad, I could barely hold the rifle. Smoke curled from the chimney, and for a moment I thought I'd finally made it home. But as I approached, I froze. The door was open, and carved into it, deep and fresh, was a single word. "Welcome." I didn't go inside. I turned, and I kept walking. Days later, weeks maybe, I stumbled into town. Clothes shredded, skin blistered, eyes sunken. People rushed to me, voices overlapping, hands grabbing me, guiding me to safety. But all I could do was laugh, because over their shoulders, across the street, in the shadow of the church steeple, I saw him, my friend, smiling, watching, and behind him antlers. Always the antlers. I'm home now, or at least that's what I keep telling myself. The walls are solid, the doors locked, the food is real, but at night, I hear it again. The scratching, the knocking, the voice that isn't his voice but sounds exactly the same. And sometimes, when the firelight flickers just right, I swear I see the shadow of antlers stretch across my wall. Maybe I made it out, or maybe I never left.